This is Greg Fowler for Online London. I'm with Greg Thompson, who's a candidate for election in Ward 4. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
If elected, how many hours per week on average do you expect that you would spend working in your elected capacity?
I will spend however many hours are required to get the job done.
Do you think ward councillors are currently paid enough for the amount of work that they'll have to do during the next term of City Council?
Absolutely, yes. The pay made no difference to me in making my decision on whether to run in this term.
London's governance model is undergoing significant change, as you know, and that includes elimination of the Board of Control. Do you think that this will increase the necessity for ward councillors to inform themselves about issues outside of their own ward boundaries?
Absolutely.
Do you live within the geographical boundaries of the electoral area in which you are contesting this election?
I do. I live right in the middle of the southern end of Ward 4.
How many of your post-teenage years have you lived in London?
I've been in London since 1986.
Have you attended any standing committee meetings over the last 4 years?
I've attended many standing committees, mostly with regard to issues that my community association is bringing forward, delegation status and those kinds of things.
Have you attended any Board of Control meetings over the last 4 years?
I haven't attended many Board of Control meetings because they're scheduled at a time where my job doesn't allow me to get there.
Are you familiar with the Municipal Act and the Municipal Councillor's Guide?
I'm familiar enough with Municipal Act.
Strengthening Neighbourhoods recommended development of a neighbourhood matching fund type program for large and small community projects, other than things like celebrations or events. Do you support that recommendation?
I support that recommendation with the caveat that large numbers of community associations, especially in the inner city, would have difficulty raising their portion of the matching fund. So in that sense it's concerned, but as a general principle, yes.
What maximum per project amount do you think it would be appropriate for the city to contribute to it?
Oh, I would think that many of the projects would be organized around festivals or tree plantings, so I would say $1,000 perhaps.
Do you support development of a community program to fund the creation of public art in public places?
Absolutely.
Should the city and its boards and commissions embrace the concept of making their data open and accessible to everyone as often as is possible, and adopting open standards for that data?
Unequivocally yes to that question. This is the year 2010.
When existing software applications have to be replaced or when software licenses have to be renewed, should the city adopt the use of open source software if that's possible?
I am a bit of a techno dork, so I'm not sure I can answer that question. I use open source software personally, but I don't know on a corporate level what that would look like.
Is the city's communication department being given enough resources, money and personnel to properly maintain the city website and to inform citizens in a timely fashion?
As chair of the Oldies Village Community Association, I spend a lot of time on the city website. I have difficulty navigating it, and I have some experience doing that, so I mean, off the top of my head I would say no, just based on the experiences I'm having trying to navigate the site.
Should citizens be able to subscribe to subject-specific RSS feeds from City Hall in order to stay informed?
Yes.
Should citizens be able to download the agendas of upcoming public meetings, including advisory committee meetings, at least a week in advance?
Absolutely. This is one of the big issues for us with planning, because as a community, we spend so much time in front of the planning committee, is that we're not able to get our planning committee agendas until the Friday before, which leaves us a weekend before the meeting on Monday. Not enough time, clearly.
Despite the requirement of the Municipal Act that all City Hall meetings be public, except for specific reasons, it's been argued that they most often are not, because of the inability of the public to hear what's being said. Do you support the adoption of a policy which mandates the use of microphones in all public meetings at City Hall?
Yes.
Do you think that the city ought to be webcasting all of its public meetings?
Yes.
Should the city's boards and commissions be webcasting all of their public meetings?
Absolutely, yes.
Should the chairpersons of public meetings at City Hall have to announce motions and amendments to motions and the number of votes for and against those motions so that the public can understand what's taking place?
Yes to that question. It's my hope that the new software the city brings in for its council and committee meetings may accomplish that on a screen, but certainly the chair should be announcing that for webcasts and TV viewers.
Should London hire an auditor general?
Yes.
Should homeowners have to pay a percentage of the cost for the repair of damage to underground infrastructure on their own property that has been caused by city-owned trees?
That is a really complex question. I think that the city should be taking responsibility, especially in the inner city, where homeowners often struggle with, especially with tree roots in clay pipes. And I think the city needs to step up to the plate to deal with that. But yes, I think as a general principle, it should be a shared expense.
Do you agree with the placemaking concept of neighborhood gateways?
Yes, absolutely.
Should there be increased user representation on the London Transit Commission?
I think that there is absolutely a need for a different structure on the London Transit Board. I think users of the service need to be included in that decision-making process.
If the City of London's going to provide venture capital to businesses, then should the city be guaranteed a return on its investment in the event that those businesses become profitable?
I think that if the city is going to act as a venture capital banker, then there's no reason, in my view, why the city shouldn't be entitled to the same benefits that the private market gets for doing that.
Should people be allowed to naturalize their lands?
Yes. In fact, I think we need to do much more of that.
Are London's pedestrians and pedestrian issues sufficiently represented at City Hall?
No.
The traffic and parking bylaw prohibits people from using any sidewalk for any purpose other than pedestrian traffic, except as specifically permitted. Should downtown patios, which consume most of the width of the public sidewalk, be permitted?
Well, I think that if we're going to create a downtown that people want to visit, we need to come to terms with the fact that we need those people need those open spaces. This isn't a business issue. This is a visitor to the downtown issue. We need more patios. But we also need to recognize the structure of downtown streets and sidewalks. And patios created willy-nilly within the existing infrastructure often force people to have to step out into the street to walk around them. So it's a bigger issue than simply talking about cafes. Yes, the cafes, but we need to redo the infrastructure to allow that.
When closure of a public sidewalk for construction purposes takes place, what steps should be required to ensure that pedestrians are not forced out onto the roadway in a manner which puts them at risk?
Well, I think that if we ever get to a point where we have a pedestrian charter of rights or something to that effect, that I think that there are ways of doing hoarding properly that allow work to be accomplished on the buildings at the same time as pedestrians are protected from injury without forcing them out onto the road.
Is the warranted sidewalk program sufficiently funded?
No.
Is the warranted walkway program sufficiently funded?
Definitely not.
Old unlit streets are not lit unless there's a local improvement program application and a cost-sharing agreement amongst the owners. Do you agree with that policy?
I don't know enough about that policy to have an opinion.
Do you think special funding ought to be provided to London Police for the purchase of additional Speedwatch radar trailers and the cost of having the auxiliary police section deploy them on a frequent basis?
I think that one of the problems we have with speeding in this town is that people are just unaware of how fast they're going. So I think that those devices are very useful for most people, not for all people. So yes, I would agree that we need to do that more often, but we need to do it within the existing budget of the London Police Service.
Should the city be spending as much as it is per year from the federal gas tax to construct on-road bike lanes in London?
Yes.
Should bicycles be allowed on public sidewalks?
I would love to live in a city where cyclists don't have to ride on public sidewalks. I don't think they should be on public sidewalks, but I understand sometimes why people do that.
Should persons in motorized wheelchairs and other mobility devices that are on the public sidewalk be obliged to yield for pedestrians?
Well, that is a question that it's never occurred to me, and I'd hate to try and blunder through that.
Should the city install more bike racks?
The city should install more bike racks. If we're serious about promoting active transportation in the City of London in the year 2010, we have to make the bike infrastructure a lot better than it is now.
Do you think the theft of bikes is an important issue?
I think it is, especially to the theftee.
Do you have any suggestions about what might be done to combat the problem?
I've traveled a lot I've traveled some in Europe, and the way they store bikes in Europe is quite interesting. And with next generation bike stands and the like, I just think we need to provide better opportunities for people to secure their bikes everywhere they go.
Is London currently spending enough money to promote its web-based ride match service?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Do you think there should be dedicated and discounted carpool parking spaces on downtown streets and in city-owned lots?
Yes.
Should every signalized London intersection provide advanced left turns?
I don't think so, but I think we need to do a much better job of identifying those locations where signalized left turns would be useful.
Does the city currently provide sufficient funding for the community gardens program?
I think that there's funding. Whether it's sufficient is not something I'm aware of, but I have lots of my friends that use the community gardens here at Curling Heights, so it's something that is useful and needs to be supported.
Should all dogs have to be muzzled when they're not on their owner's property?
No, I don't think so. I think we have a good enough idea now of dangerous breeds. I think the dangerous breeds absolutely must be muzzled. And I see pit bulls all the time being walked without muzzles, so we need to do a better job on that.
Should dogs be allowed at community events?
I have a personal opinion. I mean, I've never asked people their feelings on that or consulted with them. My personal feeling walking through the festivals at Victoria Park is why. So,
do you think people ought to be able to raise chickens in their backyards?
I think that backyard chickens are a small piece of a much bigger conversation we need to have around food security and local food production.
That ends our interview. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome.